the podcast editor mastermind. I'm Jennifer Longworth.
I'm Daniel Abendroth.
I'm Brian Ensminger.
And I'm Carrie Caulfield-Eric.
And Carrie did a little informal poll asking folks what they'd want to hear about on this show. And what did you find out, Carrie?
I found out that people wanted to know about getting clients more than anything else, which kind of surprised me because I thought people would want to know like stuff about like how do I work during COVID and all those kind of other things. But nope, they want to know still about getting clients. I think that's the most common question.
That's like the biggest thing for professional podcast editors is how to get clients.
So we thought that we might share with you all how we got our first clients. So who wants to start?
I think Daniel should start.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
All right, Daniel, you've been nominated.
A little embarrassing, but I actually got my start on Fiverr, of all places, charging $5 to edit an episode, regardless of length.
Regardless of length?
Yeah. Fortunately, they were never like more than 30 minutes, so I guess it wasn't as bad as it could have been. But I was definitely way charging way less than I should have. So my first client ever was a podcast called Our Brains, Your Business, something like that, something weird. I did one episode and then never heard from him again. He never uploaded another episode. He never did anything else. And then my next two clients, I'm actually working with still, but charging much more than the $5. They're still paying less than like my base rate just because they've been with me so long and I've gotten a lot of work because of them, but they aren't paying the $5 anymore.
So you mentioned that they're still paying less than your current rate for new clients. What's your perspective on rate increases? So you've got somebody that's been with you for a while. You appreciate them, but you've also invested in education, in tools, in experience. What's your perspective on rate increases?
So there's a difference between what I think I should do and what I feel comfortable doing, because I think I should like raise my clients' rates so I can keep them at the same level and just kind of match like what my going rate is. But I have a hard time arbitrary. Like I know like my education and like I've gotten better, but that doesn't always like come across. Like my clients may not see that, because they're not hearing it. So it's kind of difficult for me to, on my end, justify just like raising their rates for doing essentially the same kind of work. But fortunately, they've been really cool about like explaining, understanding like, because they're all in business as well. So they know like prices go up. But I was in the process of like trying to get all my clients at the same on my new rates. But now I have a whole nother conundrum because I don't feel comfortable raising rates during the pandemic right now.
Right.
Yeah, but I don't feel comfortable dropping rates either. And I just read somebody drop their rates. I think it was a larger company though, so they probably do a lot of volume, but they dropped their rates down to like something like $35 an episode.
We're working on offering like a promo right now to launch. So it's like it's a special price. Like my monthly rates aren't lowering, but I'm offering like a special discount for
people who want to start right now.
Yeah, it's a one-off launch package. So if they do that, there's a little bit of a discount. And then like if anything, like, I'm not going to lower my rates, but I might offer something extra for free. Like maybe like I'll throw in an audiogram for free or just something just a little extra at a discount, but not actually discounting like my current rates. Does that make sense? If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. So
I don't want to like devalue my work.
Yeah, and that's the challenge, right? Go ahead, Barry.
No, go ahead. You seem more thoughtful than I do.
I mean, that's the challenge, right? Because lowering your rates to help people that are trying to launch something right now or to help people through this can feel like a loss leader. But at the same time, it can set a precedent where you start negotiating against yourself without any input, right? So I know of people that have intentionally gone out and said, hey, we know that you're likely facing some difficulty right now. So we would like to offer you this during this time, which is incredibly generous. However, it may not actually be needed. And so like, where do you start drawing the line where you go, okay, I can offer this to somebody, or I should wait for them to ask for it, but I won't offer it to this other person. Like, it starts to get really weird, and I'm not quite sure that I have it fully worked out in my head. It just makes me feel really generous to be able to do something like that if I was one of those people. But at the same time, it makes me wonder, if I was the customer, is there a reason that they couldn't previously do this? Or like, yeah, let's say that you're charging 75 an episode for a basic edit. I'm making up numbers, and you drop your rate to 35 for a month or two to help everybody out. Does your rate need to go back up? Like, that's the next question for me, is like, thanks a lot, but now should I be paying more than double as soon as we get done with this?
That's a really good point, because I know. So I was having this conversation with my husband last night about all the companies that are offering things for free that I am currently paying for.
I know, right?
They didn't offer it to me for free. And on the one hand, I get it. It helps, what I'm paying helps subsidize everybody else. But on the other hand, like, I'm going through this too, right? And what I think is going to happen, and what I suspect will happen after all of this pandemic stuff, is that they will then increase their rates, because now they've hooked people right into their service, into like Netflix or Hulu or what have you. And now they've got 1 million more subscribers, and they're making up for the lost profits by charging everybody an extra dollar. And I don't think that's necessarily a nice business practice, although it's like helpful, but also helpful in the short term, hurtful in the long term, essentially, because they're just going to make me angry and I'm going to like them less. So that's how if I was a customer and you decided to cut your rates by over half or even half, my first question is like, well, if you can do this now, how come you didn't do it before? Right. And then when you're going to charge me like regular rate later, I may go look for somebody else, because I got used to paying that rate. So I'll sacrifice a little bit of quality to go find somebody who can give me a 50%, that 50%, off your price. So what I have done personally is just had the conversation with my clients that, look, I'm here for you. If you need anything, if something needs to change, let's talk about it. Right. And I've already had some of those conversations like, well, what happens if we don't have any income coming in and I can no longer pay you? Right. So I've given them ideas of what they can do, and just made it very clear that, I will do as much as I can to help you out, even if it's, delaying payment. And I gave them ideas to what they could do to keep the show going if they had to like pause my services. And I think that's probably more helpful than just giving a quick discount, right?
Yeah. And that's something similar to what I'm comfortable offering if it comes to that, right? So most of my clients are due upon receipt. So I send the invoice and it's due that day. Most of them have set up pre-authorized payment. So the invoice goes out, it's paid without anybody ever touching it. What I am comfortable doing is going, okay, if cash flow is an issue, what would happen if we could go to net 15 instead of due on receipt, right? So you can hang on to the cash for an extra 15 days to keep your business running, but then it still hits the P&L, right? And it might hit the wrong month, but I haven't actually changed the rate. I've just changed the payment terms.
Right. And I'm not going to hassle anybody for a late payment right now. I'm just not. Because
I thought you were going to raise your late payment rate to like 200 or something.
I was, what? Right before this, I was like considering it, because it was, but then I knew something was happening, obviously, because this became a problem where it wasn't before. Hey, Sandy, we're so glad you're here. But yeah, so that's how I'm basically dealing with it. And I thought it was really weird, though, that I saw that company just like they had this whole thing about how they were cutting rates. And I'm like, I don't know that that's helpful, right? I don't know that helps. That solves a problem for anybody. That just gets them more like volume business.
I'm repackaging right now is what I'm doing. I had a launch package for X amount of dollars, but it also included studio time and these many episodes edited and stuff. So instead of doing that package, found a lower price point, but also a lot less is included in that package. And I kind of tested it out with a couple who wants to start a podcast but doesn't need everything that was in the first package anyway. And then kind of came up with this new thing. And went, oh, well, maybe I should have a lower price point for people who don't need everything, but also going into what you guys are saying right now. It's not discounting my services per se. It's still, value for what I'm giving, but it's, more manageable for some people.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think that's totally awesome. And I've been looking into ways too to make the services cheaper. Like, what can I do to make it affordable? And one of the things I can do is hand off a show from beginning to end to a team, like one of my team members, have them do the bulk of the work, and that way that keeps the rate lower. All I need to do is review it, send it back to them if there's a problem, but it reduces my workload, which is, my time is more expensive, obviously. And so that has allowed me to drop some prices on some services.
So, Brian, how'd you get your first client?
So Daniel was talking about starting on Fiverr. I actually started my first editing client for absolutely nothing. And it was an interesting story. And this isn't something that I recommend as a client acquisition strategy. So I'm just going to throw that out there. I'm just sharing the reality of what happened, right? So I had a man who was a guest on my first podcast, the Engaging Missions Show. And we kind of hit it off, and he had some background in radio. And he said, hey, I've kind of got the itch to get back into this. I did radio back in I want to say it was 80s or 90s, back in the day when I would have been listening to radio too. And he said, how about I produce a 1 to 2 minute segment for your show? So we'll drop it in, because at the time my show was structured in 3 big chunks with short breaks in between. I didn't do ads, but if I had, that's where they would have gone. And so he said, okay, well, we'll fill one of those slots with this leadership moment, the leadership minute or whatever we called it, that you're going to produce. And so he would record that, but then he doesn't have the editing background. So then that would come in. And at the time I was working with an editor, so I would have him do that. I would usually do a pre-edit and then send that off, and it would all get stitched together, because the editor that I was paying was really being paid to edit my show and not this other guy's stuff. So I would try and get it cleaned up, and we would work with that. But then, I don't know, maybe 6 months or so into that, he said, hey, I'm having trouble keeping these down to a minute. What happens if we just break this off and make it its own podcast? So we talked that one through, and we took all of the previous segments that he had produced, and I want to say it was something like 30 or so. We took all of those, and we immediately back populated his podcast feed, and then he launched his own show with way more than the recommended 1 to 3 to 20 or whatever, depending on what guru you listen to. He launched it with more than that, but we got that show launched, and then I edited that for him for quite some time. And it was, probably 6 months or a year into editing his show for him that I really wanted to level up my game. And so then that's when I invested in Chris Curran's podcast engineering school, learned a lot more, picked up some tools. And he did a lot of on-location type recording. So I want to kind of paint the picture for you, because this isn't what I recommend, but the reality is I was editing a show for free that was very often recorded on location in less than ideal situations. So on a farm in Mexico, in a van, on the way to, like, a lot of difficult stuff. And so what happened was that I got really, really good at working with some of the repair tools like Isotope's RX7. I got pretty good at matching levels, EQ, and that kind of stuff. And even though I had some background in editing and I had gone through podcast engineering school, this was the show that allowed me to really level up my game as an editor. And then he launched a second show. And then a little while into that, I started picking up other clients and then also started charging him. So I'd been producing his show for a while. And then we brought him on board. He'd been asking for a while, hey, what should I pay you? And I didn't have an answer for him because I didn't really know. And so then I brought him on, and he then became the client that I started for free that now has 2 shows and has transitioned to paying me along with the other clients that I have.
Nice.
Hey, Brian. So I'm Mikhail. I'm sorry if I butchered your name. I'm sorry. Do you see his comment? Are you using now what you've been taught at Chris Curran's school?
All the time.
Tell him about the mule.
A couple of horses, a couple of mules. Is that what you're going for?
Yeah. I know. We need a berry.
So I picked up a number of things from the podcast engineering school, one of which was a really good handle on workflow. So like I said, I had some background in music. I actually went to school to be a music teacher. So I'd played in bands and I'd mixed live sound. Like I'd done all of that kind of stuff. But what I didn't have was a really good workflow. And so not only did I pick up a few things about the fundamentals and some of the tools and the tips and stuff, but I also picked up the workflow where using a tool like RX7, before I start editing anything, I go through and I do an assessment of what I've got and I do the audio repair. Then I bring it in and I assemble all the pieces and do the EQ and the compression and the normalization. And then I go through later and do the bulk and the detailed editing and then the mastering stages. So I use that kind of stuff all the time. I use what I picked up in terms of how I work with the tools. Isotope, I use Ozone, I use the FabFilter Pro Q, I use several of the Waves and some other plugins. I don't use Reaper, which is the software that he prefers. I use Hindenburg, which is the software that I prefer. Daniel's a Reaper guy. I'm a Hindenburg guy, and Carrie and Jennifer are Audition. But that tool is really more a matter of preference. But what I did pick up was a really good understanding of that. And then having been part of the first class, I've also had the advantage of being part of his community in a Slack group where we have access to him through that group. We have Hangouts. We have the occasional tutorial that he puts together for us. But then as other people come through, not only do I get to share what I've learned, which helps reinforce it for me, but I get to pick up from some of the stuff that they're learning because I was part of the first class. And while it was great, I'm certain that several classes later, Chris has gotten better too. And so I get the benefit of that through them.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah. I want to take his class too, or I don't even know. It seems like more than a class. It seems like a
course.
It's a cult. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely on my to-do list to save up for that.
Yeah. I mean, it really is solid.
I totally believe it. I've just learned a lot from just listening to him. So
that's my story. Who's next?
Carrie's next because I'm emceeing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, look at you. So my first client was from Upwork.
Nice.
And I think I charged something like $60 an episode.
To start?
But I was doing the show notes. I was doing the newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing the blog posts. I was
okay, that changes things.
Yeah, inviting. I was even like sourcing guests. I mean, I'm creating all the images. So I was pretty much doing everything. And I still do most of that for this show today. However, he is up to my normal rate. And this was, I started with him. We started together, actually, because he was my first client almost 3 years ago now. And I can get his show done in about a couple hours, all of it from beginning to end, from editing to like making the blog post. So now it all makes sense financially. But yeah, I had put out I think I wrote 100 proposals on Upwork one day.
Wow.
Wow.
It's a numbers game, quite frankly. And I talked to a lot of people and he just happened to pick me. So it was really cool. It's, to be able to grow together. And now actually he is putting out extra episodes. So I'm getting paid even more this month, which is nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was hard finding those first clients, I think. And my skills, I was still using Audacity. I was still figuring out what I was doing. Yeah, it was. I think finding a good first client is really important if you're going to put it, to put in, you got to put in sweat equity to some degree. Like I like your story, Brian, where you just started out really small and it turned into something like it got you to where you are now, even though you didn't get paid for it. I think there's value in that though, because I think it's so if it doesn't work out, there's nothing, you don't lose anything.
Yeah. And like, I got lucky with some of my earlier clients because I had one who forced me to charge her more because she didn't feel comfortable with what I was charging her. And she really encouraged me to like raise my rates, but I didn't feel like it's kind of a thank you. I'm like, I don't want to raise your rates. And then she's like, I couldn't sleep last night because I felt bad about what you're charging me. So please raise my rates and like charge me like back. Like she wanted me to kind of retroactively bill her for like all the episode I worked for, that I edited for her at like the higher rate. So, and then there was like one other that was just like, you need to charge more. And like, here's how you do. Like, she's really like in the business world. So like a lot of my clients have like helped me along the way. So there is value in that. And I will say, Carrie, you're talking about how like with Upwork and like, these gig marketplaces, it's a numbers game. And that's why I don't really recommend starting the way I did. Because like I was charging like dirt cheap rates for a very long time. And now like I rank pretty well. So it's kind of, I know I can charge a lot more and I still get some traction. But like on Fiverr, you have to like charge very little and like constantly put out proposals and like look at the buyer requests, they call it. And you have to put in a lot of work and like a lot of people are doing the same thing. So it takes a lot of grind to get to the point where your listing stands out.
Yeah, it seems like, so 3 years ago when I started, it was much different on Upwork, and they've changed their policies. I think I have a team member who I paid through Upwork. I found him through Upwork a while ago, and it was like, I got lucky with him, but it's a little bit more expensive to me to like, for me to, if I want to hire anybody on Upwork, I've got a friend.
Kitty.
Yes, this is James. He doesn't get it. But he's totally distracted me. Totally throwing me off the game. Well, I don't know. What was I going to say? Who knows? We're going to have to edit this part out.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot different than it was.
Oh my God.
Daniel, you just got a question on here. How little was your dirt cheap price?
$5. Like I started, it's Fiverr, so I was like, yeah, do anything for $5. Like I was editing like 30-minute episodes for $5, and I did that for way too long. But not anymore. Like now, it's like it's pretty. Like I'm still on Fiverr, but the minimum I charge for like really simple editing is $50, and that's really just to kind of. I use it to weed out the people that I don't want to work with, because with Fiverr, like you get a lot of people that want to spend $5 for professional work, and they see my listing and immediately go somewhere else because there are cheaper options out there. But the people that do end up messaging me understand the value, and I'm not wasting my time dealing with everybody else. And Fiverr has changed a lot as well, because now they actually have a category specifically for podcast editing that didn't exist a year ago, I think.
Yeah, it's much different. I remembered what I wanted to say though.
Excellent.
So James and I are going to say that. Oh, he's going to headbutt the microphone now. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. He's just like, there's not much you can do with him. He's like 30 pounds a cat. So with my first clients, when I realized that I was doing so much and being very underpaid for it, I sat down and did the math to figure out how much money I was making per hour and how much money I was going to have to pay on, in taxes and expenses on it. And I had a very frank conversation with this client because, and I could because he's a wonderful person. So that made it a lot easier. So I knew that I was going to need to raise my rates. I had kind of a target in mind. I wanted to kind of do $25 an hour. And when I showed him the math, he couldn't believe it. Like he literally just didn't know. And he was almost like embarrassed that he was paying me so little for all that work. So he really had no problem like paying me more and having me do less for him so that I could get a fair wage from him because I wasn't making minimum wage. That wasn't, that minimum wage here in Delaware is $7.25 or was $7.25 at the time. I was not making that. So just sitting down, doing the math, calculating it, and showing that math to my client was really eye-opening. And so now he pays everybody he works with a little bit better, I think, because he had that kind of eye-opening experience. I had that eye-opening experience. So, I try to pay my contractors a fair wage as well.
Yeah, and you raise an interesting point, right? That this is something that Chris mentioned in podcast engineering school that I didn't do right off. I track for every episode that I edit. I track how long it takes me to do that. So I track how much time goes into audio repair and restoration, how much time goes into mixing and editing, how much time goes into mastering and rendering, and then if there are any additional services like uploading or there are a couple where I will add the show notes that they write and I'll upload them and I'll schedule everything in WordPress for them. I track all of that so that I know how much time it's taking me for the different editing styles that I offer and the different lengths of the shows. And then I also understand in rough numbers about how much I make per hour on every show and for every editing style. And that way I can understand if there are places in my pricing where maybe I can trim the fat tiny bit, so to speak, to make sure that I stay competitive for what I'm offering. But also if there are places where I'm doing more than needs to be done or it's taking longer, then I can look at, are there ways that I need to look at reducing the time that's required? Or is this something where I need to have a conversation the next time we come up for contract renewal to go, hey, I've been offering this at this rate, but based on where we are right now, I need to make the rates this in order to keep them competitive.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. And I don't do it like consistently, but I will do time studies and I will figure out where I'm spending my time and how much it's costing me to spend my time in those places, essentially. Although I hate doing math so much that I'm sure you have a spreadsheet for it, Brian.
I do. I have a Google Doc and it's got lots and lots of rows now. One row for every episode.
So do you have like the calculations, like the formulas for that? Because
what do you mean?
So like, is it a spreadsheet or a doc?
It's a Google spreadsheet. Yeah.
Okay. Do you calculate so I can't do math in a spreadsheet. That's how bad I am.
Okay.
I mean, I can do some.
Yeah. So I guess I'll just, at a high level, I have different clients and some clients have more than one show. So I'll have a reference to what client it is, what show that it is, and then the actual episode information. And then I'll put information in there around what editing style that they've requested. So whether it's a streamlined edit or an expert edit or something like that, whatever that is that they've requested, the date that I got it, the date that they wanted it delivered back to them. So that gives me an understanding of whether or not they're complying with my standard turnaround time or not. And if it happens too much that they're looking for something faster, then we may need to look at reviewing that. My practice is I will always turn it around as fast as I can, but I do ask for a certain amount of time. And then I also pay attention to when I actually delivered it back to them. I track how long the raw audio was, if they'd given any edits to clip portions out that I don't actually have to listen to and edit, and then how long it was when I was done. And then I track how much time went into the audio repair So as an example, I had one that I was working on yesterday, I think, where it was three tracks, 35 minutes total length, roughly. And the audio repair for those 3 tracks took over 30 minutes, right? So if I think about a 4-to-1 ratio, I would expect maybe somewhere in that range of 1.5 to 2 hours total edit time for everything. Just kind of what I figured that I would want to put into that. But when I spend 30 minutes in audio repair because of the quality of the original recordings, then that becomes a factor that I might need to consider when we start talking about rates again. So I do all of that. And then based on that, I can understand, because I know how much I should be making on that episode based on what I'm charging, not including taxes, just like gross receipts. Then I can say, okay, based on this, for my time that went into it, I got this much per hour. And I can average that out over a time period. But then I can also start to understand, okay, based on the duration of the tracks that I was given and the number of tracks, it takes me I make about this much per minute of raw audio. That's not something I've really dug into, but that's another way that I can look at it in case I need to look at different pricing models.
Cool.
Yeah, I would be interested in getting just kind of like a blank spreadsheet.
Okay.
For you. And I think that would be really great maybe for our listeners as a resource to have just a template they can use. And if one of our lovely listeners right now could type into the live stream chat, podcasteditorsmastermind.com, so people know where to go to get that when this episode is released. That would be really helpful because my hands are full. I can't do any typing. So Jennifer, I don't mean to take over, but it's your turn.
I was like, it's going to get to me eventually.
No, never.
Well, my background is from a small radio station here in Lexington, Kentucky, and we were pivoting in what we were doing and started focusing more on podcasts in general. And then so I was learning my skills that way and getting paid. I was salaried with the radio station, so I was getting paid through that. But then I was like, maybe this is something I could go out on my own and do. And so I had joined some of the podcast Facebook groups, like Podcast Movement Community and, things like that. But it was the Podcast Movement group. And a guy on there just posted, he said, every time I hire someone, I ask them what podcast they listen to. I was like, interesting. I wonder what this guy does. So I, stalked him on Facebook, see what this guy does. And then on his profile, he's like, I'm looking to hire someone to help me with Twitter. Well, at the time, I was a student getting my degree in communication new media, and Twitter was one of the things I was getting pretty good at. So I was like, hello, I'd like to help you with Twitter. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, what if you need a podcast editor? So we get on the phone. Yeah, like a phone call. You remember those things? Yeah, like on the phone, not even a Zoom call. And we're going through this, and I keep trying to kind of manipulate the conversation a little bit so that by the end, he's like, you know what? You should edit my podcast. And I'm like, boom. Yeah, I should. So that's how that started. And then my second client, I must have found in the Facebook group too. And he couldn't afford my low rate. So he was paying a low rate because he was client number 2 on my own. And I needed to, figure out what I was doing. But that was like the worst 3 hours of my week, and at least 3 hours. And it's like, oh my gosh, I will never do that again. And I've more than doubled my rate since those days. Thank goodness. But that's how I found my own. And so I encourage people to look on Facebook too. We laugh that whenever someone in one of the big groups says, I need a podcast editor, we all kind of flock towards it. Like with the seagulls and stuff. But that's not what I did. I saw someone comment about something else and, engage in conversations. And I've gotten clients from Facebook who weren't the ones who asked for the editor, but they check those posts sometimes and see who's recommended, and they saw that I was recommended on one. But she's been with me for a while. Those two original clients are no longer with me, so I didn't have to have the I'm going to raise your rates conversation because they fell off because they weren't paying enough for it to be a value. So
That's nice.
yeah, no, I don't have them anymore. I have people paying 5 times that much. So
Yeah.
That's nice. That's nice.
So do you guys have success finding clients in the Facebook groups?
Yes.
Sometimes.
Yeah. I think, but in a very indirect way, because I think that it is through just being present, being part of the community, and just giving help whenever you can. People get to know you. And so when they're ready to hire an editor, they will seek you out and book an appointment with you to talk about what you do. And, I think that it is probably better. Like, I will comment on those posts when the bigger groups where it's like, does anybody know an editor? And I will not comment that I am a podcast editor. Well, I'll tell them I'm a podcast editor, but then I will give them resources like our Just Busters group, if it's in the She podcast, where they can go find a female editor specifically. Or I will, point them to who was it, Brittany's show, who told you how to hire a podcast editor. Like,
That was Brittany.
Yeah. So I will kind of, flip the script a little bit and not actually advertise myself, but just be like, okay, well, you're looking for a podcast editor. Here's some helpful information and some resources for you. And I've gotten clients that way too, because it stands out.
Being helpful. People like be helped.
It's offering value.
Nope.
So what about you guys? What about our dudes? What are your tips?
I think that I'm interested in having a discussion about this on a future episode.
Yeah, future episode.
So one of the gaps that I see for me is that right now I have about as many shows as I can handle with my current workload, but I also don't have a really good system and process in place yet to attract additional people, because there's going to be attrition, right? So I always need to be out there marketing and selling, and I don't really have a good marketing and sales. I hate funnel, but I don't know what else to call it. I don't have a really good pipeline
process.
Well, yeah,
if you don't want to say pipeline and funnel.
Yeah, I don't like pipeline and funnel because they're dehumanizing, right?
Right. And I hate that dehumanizing aspect of marketing, but I kind of love the human parts of marketing. So I'm torn.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not a basketball person, but there's always the idea that you need to have a deep bench on your team. Well, I also need to have a line of fans or something. Like, I don't know. And I need to have a pipeline of some kind of people that either are contacting me for consulting that are also potential future. Like, there needs to be something there.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Like, all of my clients have either come through Fiverr one way or another, or have come by referral from my current clients. Yep. So I've never needed to make an effort to find new clients. They've always kind of come to me. So that's kind of the position I'm in now. Like, I need to change that to kind of have a better system so that I'm attracting my ideal clients as well.
But you are kind of attracting them through word of mouth.
Right. Yeah.
Because there's nothing more powerful than that recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say if you haven't had to go out and get them, that's really great.
Right. But then when I'm interested in growing, because it's feast or famine, I'm either getting 5 at one time, or I'll go a month without any kind of progress on that front.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I do want to do more consulting and more auditing and kind of these one-off solutions, and just have that kind of, I don't know what the word is, but just kind of have that action going on.
Yeah. So we need to have an episode all about current client acquisition strategies.
At some point we need to, yeah.
Yeah.
Write that down. Whoever writes things down, Brian.
Brian.
Oh, okay.
Whoever it is, probably named Brian.
He's our resident note taker.
Yeah. He's the reason like anything's pretty much happened.
Yeah, that's very true. He's a doer.
Looks like Sandy has a question in the chat.
Do you let current clients know you're interested in more work, leveraging their networks to grow your business? So I do. I have a referral program kind of, but basically if one of my clients like refers somebody to me and we launch the show and like we bring out like they sign up to work with me, then I give my client like an amount off their next invoice. But definitely, and like my clients, like I have a very specific ideal client and they're all very like they have their own kind of gatherings type thing. So like they all interact with each other. So like it's really useful for me because like one of them can put it out into their group like, hey, if you need a podcast editor, I know a guy. So I definitely do use my current clients.
I don't. I don't like. So I think referral programs are absolutely wonderful, and I'm not knocking it at all. But just personally, I am like, I guess maybe I feel like my customers shouldn't be bothered with that. Like I don't know. That's just how I am. I'm like, because I have a strong customer service background, my whole thing is it is all about my customers. Like I very rarely make it about me. And I feel like letting them know I'm looking for work makes it about me. It makes it too much about me. And when I want to be focusing on them and making them feel special, essentially. And I think that especially when you're charging the rates that I'm charging, you have to kind of pamper your clients and make them think that you do nothing but serve them. So, which is, I'm not quite like, hoity-toity, but I just that is how I've always handled customer service. Like never let them see you sweat, essentially. Like the house could be burning down and I'd be like, it's okay. We're going to be fine. So
I've had my clients ask me if I'm taking on more work. Like I know somebody, and so I haven't had to ask them necessarily that I've never approached it. I've thought of a referral program, but I've never done it. But some of my people send me folks anyway because they like what I do. Their friend says, hey, who do you work with? They say, oh, Jennifer, she's great. And then it just comes my way. So it's not that I'm going out and seeking it out. Although I'm like, this is a good idea. Maybe next time I send out a email to people, I'll go, oh, and by the way, if you know anyone who needs editing, give them my number. So yeah. I'm like, that's not a bad idea. I might have to start sneaking that in there. Yeah. So thanks for the idea.
Yeah. So I'm in the boat of I probably should, but I don't. And so to answer you directly, Sandy, not yet. I've got a couple of interesting things. So my longest client, which would be Scott, the guy that I started editing for free, has sent several people to me for consulting. I haven't really picked up any editing from that, but I've definitely had some consulting come through that way. One of the people that I work for actually has a media production company. And so I do editing for her under her business's name. And I haven't really asked her for referrals too much. We've talked about it. And if she knows somebody that's looking for an editor that doesn't want full on production, she's glad to send them to me. But I don't want to put her in a position where I've also asked her to refer her competition to me. So I haven't really pushed on that one, but that's something I maybe could revisit and see how I could approach that in a way that benefits her as well.
Yeah, and I think that's really if it benefits your customers, then absolutely do that. Like I know I said that I don't do that, but I don't have a problem with that either. Like mine is really just a personal decision. And also I like to control the ebb and flow of my customers. So I don't want, I I don't want bad timing to happen where like, because clients don't act on things immediately. They don't act on things like that immediately. So like 6 months later, I don't want them to refer like 3 people at once, because that's onboarding those 3 people is going to be total chaos too. So that's another reason. But definitely I've had clients ask me if I'm taking on new clients, if I'm interested in talking to somebody, and I will absolutely say yes to that, at least to get to know them. And I think it's totally okay to like ask other editors if they know of anybody, or I refer potential clients to editor friends all the time. Like, I do it for these guys. So that's another thing that you can do, is let other editors know, because unless you're like a volume business, you can really only handle so much work. And so I like to kind of keep tabs on who's taking clients and who's not.
I am.
Okay, so Jennifer first, and then everybody else. But yeah.
Yeah. And that might also be another future topic that we could talk about, which would be the idea of a volume or a scaled business versus a boutique business. And the difference between those, because I view what I do as more of a boutique business. I have aspirations to maybe someday have agency size, but at the same time, I don't know. I'm not sure that I'm the right person to run that business. Now, maybe I would be when I got there, but there's a difference, right?
Right.
Because as a boutique, even though I have some standard rates and standard packages, I can work with somebody and say, well, for you, we're going to do something very specific that meets exactly the way you want to work together with me with the budget that you have. Where, if I've got, 3 options and it's this one, or this one, and I'll assign you an editor and a project manager, that's a bit of a different model.
Yeah. And that's something,
go ahead,
that's something that I've kind of, I had the thought, like, a while back, like, where do I want to go with this? And part of like the way I like the way things are is that relationship with my clients is like, they know like I'm the one handling it. They can come to me with whatever issues they have. It's a much more intimate relationship than hiring just like some kind of cold entity, like a company. And in order to do that, I've I wanted to be like more like kind of building that relationship with my clients. Like, so I started doing quarterly calls just so that way they can see me face to face on a video chat, and I'm more than just like somebody on an email.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like, I had to make that decision at some point. What was I going to be? Am I going to like be somebody who has like 50 to 100 clients, and is like outsourcing everything, or am I going to be more hands-on? And I enjoy working with my clients. Even when things get crazy, I really enjoy that relationship part. I like getting Christmas cards from my clients, those kinds of things. I like meeting them at conferences and like hanging out with them. So I like getting to know. So essentially, like, that boutique style suits me more. Now I've been, kind of shifting a little bit and adding in other things to the mix to kind of focus more on the relationship part, which I guess we can talk about in another episode.
Ryan, write that down.
I don't think that, like, I admire people who can rock an agency. I mean, like, people like Daryl Darnell and Chrissy Hustler. I don't always say her name wrong. I'm so sorry I said your name wrong. And I so admire it, and I'd love to have them on the show to talk about how they did that. But yeah, I don't know that's in the cards for me.
Yeah, I know, like, if I get to that point, I want to make sure I figure out a way to retain some sort of that close relationship. I don't want to lose that completely.
I don't want to manage people. That's what it kind of comes down to. I'm like, yeah, it would be great. And as far as really blowing this thing wide open, there's only so much one person can do. But I don't want to manage the people part of it. And that's another
Yeah.
Go on
See, I
for
don't
that
wanna-
forever, but
I don't want to
still.
manage a lot of people. Like I like my small little team. We can like joke around and if they need, if they need an advance real quick and I can do it for them, I can do that. I can't do that for like a team of 50 people, I can't. I get to like find out about it's about relationships even with my team. Like they've been with me for a long time. I feel like we're friends and I enjoy working with them and I can depend on them, but I know what it's like to manage a bunch of people and like have somebody not
Mhm.
show up when it's critical. I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to have like when I worked in a restaurant, if the dishwasher didn't show up as a manager, I'd have to wash the darn dishes. And
Yeah.
I don't want to wash dishes. I don't want to be stuck in the kitchen,
Right.
So that's really tough. So, if but I haven't run an agency, so I could be talking out of the side of my mouth. So maybe there's a way to do it that I just don't know about. So
Yeah, that definitely could be like an entire episode.
right.
So, Carrie, if someone wants to be a guest on our show, what do they need to do?
They need to go to podcasteditorsmastermind.com and click on the little button at the top that says be a guest. You fill out a little form and you hit submit and that's it. But there's a caveat. You get, I'm going to say you don't have to, you get the privilege of editing an episode of our show. Light editing, very simple, very easy. And then you can, show off your skills, come and talk about it. You can use the episode as a cool thing in your portfolio that you can have potential clients here. And then you can, certainly for me, and I'm sure you guys can use us as a reference to help you get that next client, to help you land that close that sale.
Yeah.
So podcasteditorsmastermind.com, click on be a guest and fill out a little form. Boom, you're done.
Yeah. And we should mention the show is in Podchaser. So after you've edited that episode and it goes live, then you can tag yourself as the editor. And that can also be part of your online portfolio. We'd love to be able to do that for you. We've gotten the show live in all the places now, so we're pretty happy about that. I want to tell everybody.
We're not just on Facebook. You gotta like and subscribe on Beyond. Watch it. We want to watch us live. We're doing live every other week.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So every other Thursday. Yeah.
And
Something
sometime
like
when you see us at a conference, you'll have to ask us about how well 4 podcast editors can work together to get a new show launched in basically no time and still be as organized as a herd of cats.
We'll have to screenshot the support tickets.
Oh gosh, I get new ones in my inbox every day. I'm like, what are you guys having problems with now? Because we have it's forwarding to me.
The good news
like,
is if
whatever.
you're a new podcaster, we feel you. Like we've all launched more than one show, and we still had the experience doing something for the first time because we used a different service to get some experience with it. Of going, what? This doesn't work the way I wanted it to.
Yeah.
So we feel you. And if you're an editor and you are starting to wonder if your clients are just that dense, maybe not. Maybe it's just their first time like it was ours.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always a learning curve to something new. And I guess shout out to podcast websites for bearing with our 50,000 support tickets from Jennifer Longworth.
I'm not the one sending the support tickets. Just clarify that. I'm the one who hooked you up a podcast website. So
I know. They're so nice.
Podcast websites.
Yeah, they're so nice. I've met them at conferences. I still have some of their tea from podcasts.
Yeah, me too, somewhere.
So,
probably right here somewhere.
Yeah. So those ladies are lovely. And I guess Mark too, but I remember the ladies. So that doesn't sound right. All right, let's edit that part out.
So I would like to say a quick thanks to Sandy and to Mikhail for hopping into the chat and asking questions and adding your comments. I really appreciate that. If you have a website that you'd like us to link up in the episode notes so that people can know where to find you if they liked your comments or your questions, pop those into the chat and we'll grab those and stick those in the episode notes for you as well.
Yeah, because the podcast mastermind is all about supporting our professional podcast editors. That's
all
it.
right,
That's
well,
all I had for that.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. We hope to see you again here on Facebook in 2 weeks. And you can download, subscribe, like, share, because if you leave us a rating and review on Apple, it helps us to get seen by more people.
No, it doesn't.
Don't even say that.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
But it does help our ego. So, and there's some days that are rough that we need that little high five and those 5
We
stars.
do.
So, and we will give them right back to you in love. So,
yeah. All right.
And also, before I forget again, we do have a Facebook page, facebook.com/podcast editors mastermind, and a group. So look up Podcast Editors Mastermind Facebook group and join us there.
Sweet.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.